My shoes were killers, but the job was worse. At 25, you'd think I'd be somewhere other than the Key, balancing trays of overpriced oysters for tourists who tipped like their arms were broken. But this was Port Verity, a city that glittered on the coastline and smelled like dead fish up close. Rhea Calder, was deep in the up-close part of town. The last table had finally paid up, leaving a measly 7% on a $500 tab. My shift was over. 8 hours of smiling until my face ached, of smelling like clarified butter and brine. All I wanted was my bed, a lumpy mattress in a fifth-floor walk-up that wasn't worth half what I paid. I was untying the apron, the cheap polyester ruff against my skin, when my burner phone buzzed in my locker, not the good buzz, the one that meant my brother Evan was off shift, but the angry, vibrating buzz of Mr. Dern, my landlord. I didn't even say hello. Dern, I told you, you'll have it on the first. The first ain't good enough, Rhea. His voice crackled, full of cheap cigars and entitlement. And the first is going to be different. We got new expenses, building security fee. Security? The front door lock has been broken for a month. My voice was flat, exhaustion sucking the fight right out of me. That's why we need the fee, he said, as if that made sense. $200 extra, starting now. You pay the new rate by tomorrow at noon, or the locks change. And I don't care if your stuff's inside. The line clicked dead. $200? Might as well have asked for $1 million. I leaned my forehead against the cool metal of the locker. My vision swam. I could feel the panic rising, that cold, metallic taste in the back of my throat. This was the third fee this year. I was already drowning. Rhea front, Mr. Finch, our manager, snapped his fingers from the hallway. We're not paying you to text. I shoved the phone back into my bag, ignoring the fact I was already punched out. On it. I walked back into the dining room, my polite waitress smile plastered on like a mask. That's when I saw them. The Key was high-end. Sure, we got bankers, we got old money types. This was different. This wasn't rich. This was heavy. 6 men, all in suits so perfectly tailored they looked like armor. They didn't talk, they just moved, parting the remaining diners like a shark moving through a school of fish. In the center of them, the epicenter, was a man I'd never seen before. He was younger than the others, maybe 30, with dark hair and a stillness that was almost violent. He didn't look at the room, didn't look at the decor. He just existed, and the whole restaurant seemed to bend around him. Sarah, our hostess, who usually handled rude customers with a smile that could cut glass, looked like she'd seen a ghost. She was pale, her hands visibly shaking as she held the seating chart. The man, the center of it all, leaned in. He didn't raise his voice. I was 10 feet away and couldn't hear a word. He just murmured something to her, his eyes on the reservation book. Sarah's face went from pale to sheet white. She swayed, grabbing the podium to steady herself. My feet ached. The threat from Dern was ringing in my ears. I was tired, I was angry, and I was fresh out of patience for men who made young women cry just by speaking. I was supposed to be invisible, just walking to the back to clock out for real, but the words slipped out, muttered under my breath, aimed at no one and everyone. God, what an ass. So rude. Silence. The restaurant, which had been humming with low conversation and the clink of silverware, went dead quiet. My voice, meant only for myself, had carried in the sudden hush. The man's head, which had been bent towards Sarah, lifted. He turned. Slowly. And his eyes found mine. They weren't angry. They were just heavy, like 2 polished stones. Mr. Finch materialized at my side, his face a mask of sweating panic. Miss Calder, he hissed, his fingers digging into my arm. What did you say? I tried to backpedal. Nothing, Mr. Finch, I was just... You're addressing a guest. He was practically bowing to the man, who hadn't moved, just watched me. Sir, I apologize. This employee is unprofessional, and I assure you... She's fired, Finch said, turning his glare on me. Get your things. You're done. Out." My stomach dropped, fired over that. The $200 I didn't have suddenly became the only thing I could think about. I was going to be homeless. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "Mr. Finch, please, I didn't mean—" "Sir," again, my deepest. The man held up a single hand, not to me, to Finch. Finch stopped talking, his mouth hanging open. The man's eyes were still on me. He didn't look angry. He didn't look amused. He looked analytical, like he was solving a math problem. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it filled the entire room. It wasn't a request. "Everyone out." Finch blinked. "Sir, I don't understand. I'm removing her right now." "Not her." The man's gaze didn't waver from mine. "Everyone else. All of you. My associates will handle your checks." He nodded to the men behind him, who fanned out, pulling out thick wads of cash. A murmur rippled through the dining room. A banker at table 4 started to complain. "See here, I haven't finished my lobster." One of the suits simply placed his hand on the man's shoulder. The banker went silent. "You have 60 seconds, the man in the center said, his voice still calm. He looked at his watch. "Starting now." It was the most surreal thing I've ever seen. It wasn't a panic. It was an evacuation. Chairs scraped, people grabbed their coats. The kitchen staff, hearing the commotion, peered out, and one of the suits just pointed to the exit. They dropped their pans and left. "Mr. Finch looked at me, then at the man. His face crumpled in confusion. "But sir, the restaurant—" "You too, Mr. Finch." Finch deflated. He gave me one last look of pure hatred and then scurried out the door with the last of the guests. In just over 60 seconds, the Key, a bustling 4-star establishment on a Friday night, was empty. The front door was locked by one of the suits, who then took up a position by the entrance, his back to us. The other 4 men fanned out, checking the kitchens, the back offices, the restrooms, leaving me and him. He was seated at the best table in the house, the one in the window overlooking the dark water of the harbor. He hadn't invited me to sit. I was still standing in the middle of the dining room, my heart hammering against my ribs, my apron still half on. I was trapped. "He was going to fire you," the man said. You got me fired," I stammered, my anger finally overriding my fear. "And then what is this? Who are you?" He looked up at me. "My name is Cassian Ardeno, and no, I didn't get you fired. I just saved your job, and probably your life. Sit down, Rhea." My blood went cold. He knew my name. I didn't move. "How do you know my name?" "It's on your time card, which Mr. Finch left on the podium. Sit." He motioned to the chair opposite him. One of his men returned from the kitchen. "Clear. Lock the service entrance," Cassian ordered. He looked back at me. "Please." My legs felt like water, but I walked over and slowly, stiffly, sat down. I was sitting opposite the most powerful man I had ever seen. In an empty restaurant he had cleared with 2 words. Am I in trouble?" For the first time, something like a smile touched the corner of his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You called me rude. I suppose I am." He signaled, and one of his men, the one who had locked the front door, came over. "She'll have a warm water. Lemon?" Cassian said. The suit nodded and headed to the bar. "I don't understand," I whispered. "I know. That's the problem." He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. The suit returned, placing the water in front of me. My hands were shaking too hard to pick it up. "I wasn't being rude to Sarah," Cassian said quietly. "I was telling her that her boyfriend, the one who works the docks, was just picked up on a BCI warrant. I was telling her to go to him, and that my organization would cover his legal fees. I was preventing what you thought was a disguised raid. I processed that. BCI, the Bureau of Civic Integrity. The ones, they were planning a raid tonight, but not on us. On the people who own this restaurant, or rather, the people who use it." I looked around the empty, opulent room. The Key was owned by a corporate hospitality group. "What are you talking about?" "This," he said, "is a laundromat, a very expensive one, run by the North Pier Syndicate." The name hit me like a physical blow. Everyone in Port Verity knew that name. They were the shadows behind the shiny facade, the rot in the city's foundation. "And tonight," Cashin continued, his voice low and intense, "you weren't safe in a crowd." "Why, what does this have to do with me?" "Because, Rhea, you're the new scapegoat." He watched me, gauging my reaction. "There's a rumor being planted that a certain waitress has been skimming from the tip pool. A discrepancy of, about $10,000. Just enough to make a desperate employee take the fall." My breath hitched. 10,000. No, I would never. "I know," he said, "but Mr. Finch doesn't, or rather, he doesn't care. He was going to pin it on you tonight, when the BCI raid went down, which the syndicate knew about. By the way, you'd be the one left holding the bag, the employee with the sudden, impossible-to-pay rent hike." My head snapped up. "You know about Dern?" "Mister? Dern is a small fish who works for the North Pier. He creates leverage. You get a $200 threat. You get desperate. You lose the tip money. They help you, and then they own you." I felt sick. "How do you know all this?" "Because I make it my business to know." He gestured slightly with his chin toward the bar. "You see the three men who were sitting there before the ones in the cheap suits? They weren't drinking. They were watching you. There's a micro camera," he pointed, "tucked behind the white orchid on the hostess stand. It's aimed at the register." I was being watched. I was being set up. "So you stopped it?" My voice was shaking. "Why?" "The BCI is an associate of mine. We have a mutual interest in seeing the North Pier Syndicate lose their footing in this city. When I saw their surveillance team, I knew their plan had moved up. And I knew you were the target." "So you called the BCI, that's how you cleared the room?" "I called the Bureau. Yes. I told them the raid was compromised and that I was buying out the entire restaurant for the night, a private function for the Ardeno Consortium, a civic integrity review." He allowed himself that small, cold smile again. They agreed it was best to hold off. The Ardeno Consortium. The name echoed in my head. They were the other shadow. The ones who ran the ports, the logistics, the half-light economy, as the papers called it. He wasn't just a boss. He was the boss. He had cleared the room to isolate me, to protect me. "So what now?" I asked, my throat dry. I finally reached for the water. "You saved me. Thank you. Can I go home?" "No." The word was flat, absolute. "Dern is expecting you. The men from the bar are waiting for you. If you go home, you'll either be persuaded to take the fall, or you'll have an accident. The North Pier doesn't like loose ends." "So I'm your prisoner." "You're my guest." He stood up, towering over the table. "You called me rude. Miss Calder. I'm a man who pays his debts. I insulted you by association, and now I'm going to fix the problem you're in." He walked to the window, looking out at the black water. The restaurant was dead silent, just the hum of the lobster tank. "If you want to survive the night," he said, his back to me, "you'll stay seated, you'll listen to me, and you'll let me make up for being called rude." My world had just tilted on its axis, fired, framed, and now protected. By the other side of the same dark coin, I was trapped. My hand was resting on my bag, on the cheap phone inside, as if summoned by the thought. It vibrated, a single, short buzz. I slipped it out under the table, my eyes still on Cashin Ardeno's back. A new message, an unknown number. My thumb slid across the cracked screen. "Don't trust the man in the window seat. Your debt is ours." My phone was a block of ice in my hand. "Your debt is ours." What debt I had, so many. They'd have to be more specific. I had the stack of medical bills Mom left behind, a monument to a fight she couldn't win. I had the defaulted student loans I'd taken out to cover her co-pays. My brother, Evan, was the hero. He was the paramedic, the one with the steady hands who actually saved people. I was the one slinging oysters, the one juggling the late fees and the past due notices, the one keeping our tiny, crumbling world from collapsing entirely. Cassian Ardeno was still watching me, waiting for an answer to a question I hadn't heard. "You look skeptical," he said, turning from the window. I slipped the burner phone back into my bag, the anonymous warning burning a hole in the cheap fabric. "You said my landlord, Mr. Dern, works for the North Pier, that he was softening me up." "He's their collector," Cassian confirmed, his voice devoid of emotion. "He applies pressure. He creates leverage." "With a $200 building security fee," I scoffed, the bitterness rising. "The front door lock's been broken for a month. It's his signature move. It's not about the money. It's about making you desperate. Desperate people," he said, his gaze flicking to the empty register. "Make mistakes." "And Finch," I pressed, my voice hardening. "The missing tip money. You know I didn't take it." "I told you I did." "You said it," I countered, surprising myself with the sudden spark of defiance. "You didn't prove it. For all I know, you're part of this. Maybe you're the debt collectors." "A cornered animal. That's what I was." Cassian didn't bristle. He just nodded, as if he'd expected the accusation. He gestured to the suit who had brought me the water. The man, silent as a shadow, stepped forward and placed a slim, manila folder on the polished table in front of me. It wasn't a tablet, it was old school. Paper. My fingers hesitated. I opened it. Photographs. They were grainy, black and white, stamped with a date from nearly 2 weeks ago. The angle was high, looking down into the cramped back office of the Key. Not from the minicam he'd pointed out earlier, this was from somewhere else. They showed Mr. Finch. The timestamp read 3:05 a.m. I saw him, his back to the camera, at the safe. He wasn't putting the night's envelopes in. He was pulling one out. A second photo showed him slipping the cash from the envelope into his own jacket pocket. A third, the most damning, showed him adjusting the logbook, pen in hand, no doubt cooking the numbers to hide the discrepancy. "Our cameras," Cassian said, his voice low, "are better than theirs. He's been skimming for 6 months, a little here, a little there. The deficit finally got too big for him to hide. He was just waiting for the right person to frame." He tapped the photo. "You, with your new, sudden, impossible-to-pay rent hike, you were perfect." The proof was right there. I wasn't just being set up. I was being replaced as the thief. A hot, sharp wave of relief washed over me, so strong my knees felt weak. "I have to take this to the police, right now." I grabbed the folder. "I can show them this. I can report Dern. I can report Finch. I can—" "No." The word was sharp, absolute. Cassian cut me off before I could even stand up. "What do you mean, no?" I stared at him, bewildered. "This is evidence. This proves my innocence." "This is a death warrant," Mahi countered, stepping away from the window, his patience finally cracking. "You walk into the city precinct tonight, folder in hand. You won't even make it past the front desk. The North Pier has officers on the city payroll. You wouldn't be filing a report. You'd be handing Mr. Finch's executioner the paperwork and the star witness, all gift-wrapped." The hope in my chest turned to ice. "So what? We do nothing. I just let them fire me. I let Dern kick me out onto the street." "I told you," he said, his voice firm. "The BCI is the only group we can trust tonight. The city cops are compromised. Your Mr. Finch was going to hand you over to them himself." Before I could argue, the main service door clicked open. It wasn't a guest. It was the man who had locked it. He held it open for a newcomer. This person wasn't a soldier. He was slim, mid-30s, wearing a lightweight trench coat over a suit so perfectly pressed it looked like origami. He held a tablet and moved with a frictionless, clinical precision. He was a strategist. "Jun," Cassian greeted him. Cassian, the man Jun Park, I presume didn't even look at me. His eyes were glued to the tablet in his hand. "The perimeter is clean. Harbor Line units are sweeping the alley. But we have a complication. Finch already filed an initial employee theft flag with the restaurant's insurer, naming Miss Calder." My stomach clenched so hard I tasted bile. It was already in motion. Joan finally lifted his gaze and assessed me. his expression as neutral as a banker's. You cannot go home. You cannot go to your brother's. And you cannot stay here. The consortium's ownership of the lease tonight is temporary. We need to move you. Move me where? I demanded, my voice sounding small in the empty room. A secure location. Indefinitely, June stated, as if discussing the weather. Indefinitely. I repeated the word. It sounded like a cage. You mean a safe house? You want to lock me down, to silence me until this is over. June raised a single, perfect eyebrow. It is the logical protocol to protect a material witness from retaliation. I'm not a material witness, I snapped, the adrenaline surging back. I'm a waitress who got framed. You're pulling me into whatever this is, this war between you and the North Pier. I stood up, pushing the chair back so hard it scraped the hardwood. The photos of Finch lay on the table, a testament to my tiny, ruined life. Look, I appreciate the rescue, I said, my voice shaking, but I'm not trading one owner for another. I am not your property, Mr. Ardeno. I'm not joining your consortium or becoming one of your associates. I looked from Cassian's unreadable expression to June's clinical stare. I get it. It's raining, and you've got the only umbrella. Fine, I'm just borrowing it. The second the rain stops, I'm walking away. I'm not yours. I don't belong to anyone. Jun looked, for the first time, faintly amused. That is a sentimental and statistically inefficient approach to survival, Miss Calder. Shut up, Jun, Cassian said. It was quiet, but it had the force of a slammed door. Jun closed his mouth. Cassian turned his full attention to me. The cold, analytical look was gone, replaced by something I couldn't name. Understanding. Maybe respect. I'm not keeping you, Rhea, he said, his voice dropping back to that low, intense level that seemed to vibrate in the air. I'm keeping my word. He let that hang in the silence. I said I'd fix this. That means you are not homeless, and you are not in jail. That is the promise. The umbrella is yours for as long as you need it. No strings. I wanted to believe him, but the text message was still heavy in my bag. Don't trust the man in the window. I must have been shaking. The adrenaline from the confrontation was wearing off, leaving behind the bone-deep chill of my 8-hour shift and the lingering shock. My hands were freezing. Cassian noticed. He didn't ask, "Are you cold?" He didn't offer a blanket. He just acted. "Jun," he said, turning to his advisor, "have them bring the car around. We're not using the safe house." Jun looked genuinely surprised, his composure slipping for a fraction of a second. "The loft, sir, that's not a secure facility. It's the most secure place in this city." Cassian cut him off. "Go!" Jun, recognizing a closed subject, simply nodded and vanished out the service door. Cassian walked behind the empty bar himself. I heard the whoosh of the hot water dispenser, the quiet clink of a ceramic mug. He returned, not with more water, but with a steaming mug held in one hand. "What is it?" I asked, suspicious. "Ginger. Honey, my grandfather swore by it. He said it settled the nerves." He held it out to me. As I reached to take the warm mug, my fingers chapped and sore from the restaurant's scalding sinks and harsh sanitizers brushed against his. It wasn't a caress. It wasn't intentional. It was just contact. His skin was warm, steady, and smooth. My fingers were ice cold and rough. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't pull away immediately. His gaze held mine. It was slow and heavy, and it wasn't predatory. It was assessing. It was the first time he'd looked at me like a person, not a problem. He saw the cracked cuticles. He saw the exhaustion I couldn't hide. He saw me. I took the mug, my hand closing around the warmth. His hand retreated. The moment passed, but the air in the room had changed. It was thicker, charged with an energy that hadn't been there before. "Buzz, is it?" The phone in my lap. It vibrated so hard it rattled against my leg. I looked down. Another text. The same unknown number. It wasn't words this time. It was an image. A photograph. My stomach turned to liquid acid. It was a picture of my apartment door, the cheap, peeling, seafoam green paint of Unit 5B. It was a close-up of the deadbolt taken from the hallway, taken moments ago. They were there, right now. They were waiting for me. Below the image, a single line of text. This lock is cheap. I must have made a sound, a small, choked gasp. Ria. My hand was trembling so hard I almost dropped the phone. I turned the screen around, unable to speak. Cashin looked at the screen. His entire demeanor shifted. The calm, controlled patience vanished, replaced by a cold, immediate fury that was visible, tangible. It was terrifying. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He spoke into his sleeve, into a microphone I hadn't even known was there. His voice was a blade. Jun, code black, apartment 5B, 122 Harbor Street. Full deployment, Harbor Line Protective Services. I want a new door, a steel frame, and sensors on every window. I want it done in 1 hour. Move. Harbor Line Protective Services. He was sending a tactical team to change my locks. They're at my apartment, I whispered, the reality crashing in. The tea mug rattled in my grip. Oh God, Evan, my brother, what if he goes there? He sometimes stops by after his shift. Is he there now? Cassian asked. All business, his eyes scanning the empty restaurant's exits. No, he's on shift. He's a paramedic. He works nights, too. But he might... As if I'd summoned him. My phone buzzed again in my hand. This time, the screen lit up with a name I knew. Evan. My relief was so profound I almost cried. It's him. He's okay. I snatched the phone, my thumb fumbling with the answer button. Evan, are you okay? Listen to me. Don't go to my apartment. I need you to stay away from the building. Do you hear me? Ria, thank God. His voice was breathless, panicked, and loud. Sirens. I could hear sirens wailing in the background, close and chaotic. It wasn't his usual end-of-shift calm. Evan, what's wrong? Where are you? What's that noise? I'm at work, I'm on site. He coughed, and the sound was wet. Ria, there's been an accident, a bad one. It's at your building. A gas explosion. No, it looks like Ria. The whole 3rd floor of your apartment block is on fire. Fire. The word came out as a strangled squeak. The warm mug of tea suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Evan, what do you mean, fire my floor? No, not yours. The 3rd floor, but it's spreading fast. The whole west side of the building is Ria. It's bad. The smoke, listen, I have to go. They're calling my unit. I'm coming, I said, my voice dead. What? No, it's not safe. The whole block is cordoned off. I'm coming. I hung up. I looked at Cassian. The cold fury was gone, replaced by an absolute, focused calm. He'd heard. Jun, he said into his sleeve, change of plan. We're going to Harbor Street. Now, get the car to the service entrance. Notify Harbor Line to secure my route, not the apartment. I want eyes on every street corner between here and there. I want to know who's watching. He looked at me. Your brother. He's a paramedic, I said, my voice numb. He's on site. Let's go. He didn't grab my arm. He just put a hand on my lower back, a gesture of pure direction, and propelled me toward the service door. We left the empty restaurant, the half-eaten meals, the manila folder of my innocence, and my entire former life sitting on the table. The car wasn't a flashy limo. It was a black sedan, the kind that looks like every other car in the city, only this one felt like a bank vault on wheels. The windows were so thick the chaos of Port Verity was reduced to a silent movie. June was driving. Cassian sat in the back with me, not speaking, his phone glowing as he typed a rapid-fire series of messages. I just stared at my hands. The picture of my door. This lock is cheap. They hadn't been trying to get in. They'd been telling me they were already there, setting the charges. The message wasn't a threat. It was a taunt. The drive was maybe 10 minutes. It felt like 10 years. We didn't hit a single red light. Joan moved through the streets with an impossible, fluid grace. As we got closer, the air changed. The smell of acrid chemical smoke seeped through the car's vents. We stopped 2 blocks from my building, behind a flashing wall of red and blue lights. The entire street was a war zone. It wasn't a building fire, it was a community disaster. Hoses snaked across the pavement, and firefighters, looking small and exhausted, aimed useless streams of water at the orange glow gutting the 3rd and 4th floors. But the real chaos was here, at the triage station set up in the parking lot of the neighboring convenience store. Ambulances, fire trucks, and police cars. City police were everywhere. Residents, my neighbors, huddled in shock blankets, their faces smudged with soot, coughing. "Stay in the car," Cashin ordered. "My brother is in there," I said, my hand already on the door handle. I didn't wait for his permission. I was out, and the noise hit me like a wave, shouting, crying, the roar of the fire, the crackle of radios. "Rhea?" I spun around. Evan. He was running toward me, his face black with soot, his blue paramedic jacket stained. He pulled me into a hug so tight it cracked my ribs, and I buried my face in his shoulder, inhaling the smell of smoke and antiseptic. "You're okay," he gasped, pulling back to look at me. I was so worried. "I heard you weren't home, but—" "What happened?" I asked, my voice raw. "They said a gas explosion." Evan's face hardened, the paramedic's calm replaced by his older brother rage. "That was no gas leak. Rhea, that was an accelerant. I smelled it on the first victims we pulled out. This was deliberate. Someone set this fire." My blood ran cold. Don't trust the man in the window, but then this lock is cheap. "It's Dern," I whispered, the pieces clicking together with a horrible, sickening sound. "He threatened me today. A new fee. $200 by noon tomorrow, or I was out." $200, that bastard. Evan ran a hand through his hair, leaving a black streak. "It's worse than that. I was helping Mrs. Petrov from 4C. She said Dern held a tenant meeting last week. One you missed because of your double shift. He's trying to evict the whole building. He signed a contract to sell the block to some developer." "What developer?" "Apex," Evan said, spitting the name. "Apex Redevelopment. They want to tear the whole block down, level it for luxury condos." I looked over my shoulder. Cassian had gotten out of the car. Jun was with him, standing a respectful 10 feet back, already on his phone. Cassian wasn't looking at me, or the fire, and he was scanning the crowd, his eyes moving with a methodical, predatory focus. "Apex Redevelopment," I said, loud enough for him to hear. Cassian's head turned. He met my eyes. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He already knew. He walked over, his expensive shoes crunching on the debris-littered pavement. Jun was right behind him. "Jun," Cashin said quietly. "Already on it, sir," Jun replied, his voice low, reading from his tablet. "Apex Redevelopment is a registered holding company. Its primary capital investor is a shell corporation based offshore, which, in turn, is funded entirely by the North Pier Syndicate." It all snapped into focus. The tip money, the rent hike, the fire. It wasn't 2 separate plans, it was one. They were trying to flush me out, to frame me, to discredit me, to make me run, or to bury me. Evan looked from me to Cassian. His eyes narrowed, suddenly protective. "Who are you, Rhea? What is this? How do you know this guy?" He's helping me. Evan, the restaurant, it's complicated." "Complicated?" Before I could answer, a nurse from the triage shouted, "Evan, we need a hand. Gurney's stuck. We've got an inhalation victim here." Evan's head snapped back to his work. "I've got to go." "We're coming," Cashin said. Evan looked at him, confused. Cassian didn't answer. He just followed Evan toward the struggling paramedics. The gurney's wheel was jammed in a pothole. Instead of issuing an order, Cassian bent down, his hands the same hands that had held the teacup. The ones I'd brushed against braced the metal frame. "On 3, he said to Evan. 1, 2. They lifted, the gurney rolled free, and they rushed the coughing man toward an ambulance. I stood there, stunned. For the next 10 minutes, I watched him. He wasn't the boss of the Ardeno Consortium. He was just a man. He saw a nurse struggling with a stack of supply boxes. He took them from her and carried them to the tent. He saw an old woman shivering without a blanket. He took the coat off one of his own men who just stood there, stoic, and draped it over her shoulders himself. He didn't ask. He just did. He moved with the same quiet efficiency as Evan, a man who knew how to operate in a crisis. And I saw him in a completely different light. This wasn't the man who cleared a restaurant with 2 words. This was something else. Well, well, if it isn't the neighborhood hero. The voice was oily and cold. It slid through the chaos like a knife. I turned. A man was approaching, not from the street, but from the dark alley beside the convenience store. He was tall, wearing a leather jacket that looked like it cost more than my car, and his hair was slicked back. He had a smile that didn't touch his dead, shark-like eyes. Evan, who was walking back toward me, stopped dead. "Brack," he growled. Evan, always running into the fire. Pity you can't seem to put him out. The man, Brack, sauntered over, his hands in his pockets. He glanced at me, a dismissive, head-to-toe look that made my skin crawl. This must be the little sister, the one causing all the trouble. "Get out of here, Brack," Evan said, stepping in front of me. Brack just laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I'm just here to deliver a message from management, mister. Dern is very disappointed. So is Apex. They hate delays. They hate bad press." He leaned in, his voice dropping. "Tell your sister to sign the papers. The confession about the tip money." My breath hitched. "You do that," Brack whispered, his eyes on Evan, "and maybe the fires stop. Maybe your neighbors don't get any more accidents. We just want this block cleared. She can help with that. Or she can be cleared with it." It was a direct threat. He was confessing to the arson right here, with a dozen cops 50 feet away, because he knew he could. "You're scum," Evan said, his fists clenching. "I'm just a messenger." Brack's smile widened. "You got till morning. Sign the paper, give it to Finch. This all goes away." "Or what?" I said, my voice shaking but loud. Brack finally focused on me. "Or well, a paramedic's job is so dangerous, isn't it? Evan, all those emergencies, all those dark streets." Evan tensed, ready to swing. "Don't." Cassian's voice, and he was suddenly there. He hadn't run. He'd just appeared, moving from my side, putting his body between me and Brack, and nudging Evan back with a subtle hand on his chest. I was completely shielded behind him. He was a good 3 inches shorter than Brack, but the way he stood, he seemed to take up all the air on the street. "Let me talk to your demon, Rhea," he murmured, so low only I could hear. He looked at Brack. His demeanor had changed again. The helpful man was gone. The cold, analytical boss was back, but with an edge I hadn't heard before. "Kellen Brack," Cassian stated. It wasn't a question. "You're a long way from the North Pier." Brack's smile faltered. Just for a second, he hadn't seen Cassian. "And who the hell are you, her new bodyguard?" "I'm the man who's going to buy this problem from you," Cassian said flatly. "Apex is clumsy. This," he gestured to the burning building, "is messy. It draws flies. The North Pier hates flies." Brack stiffened. "You know who I work for." "I know who you both work for, and I know they value profit over statements. So let's talk price. Name it. I'll buy the Apex contract for this block. Double what you paid Dern. Cash. Tonight." Brack stared at him, trying to size him up. "You think you can just buy your way in? We own this block." "You own a liability," Cassian corrected him. "You own a crime scene that's about to have the BCI crawling all over it." Brack laughed. That ugly sound again. "You're threatening me with the BCI, they're city clerks. They can't even find their own offices." "They'll find this." Cassian's voice was sharp. "Because about an hour ago, I sent them a package, a very, very detailed package. It has encrypted transaction logs, offshore account numbers, and a direct link from the North Pier's primary fund to Apex redevelopment. It details every dollar you've washed. The countdown started the second I hit send." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the sirens seemed to fade. Brack's face went pale, his smug confidence evaporating, replaced by a snake-like fury. "You're bluffing," he hissed. "Am I?" Cassian asked. Your bosses are probably getting the call right now. The BCI isn't the city police. Kellen, they don't make arrests. They seize assets. And you just lit the biggest asset on their list on fire. Brack stared, his mind clearly racing. He was trapped. He looked at me, then at Cassian. You, whoever you are, you just signed her death warrant. He took a step back, his bravado returning, but it was forced. So what if the papers are coming? Then we'll just have to burn it all down before they're served. There'll be nothing left to seize. He turned and melted back into the alley he'd come from. He was gone. Evan exploded. That's it. He just walks away after threatening us. After admitting to this, I'm calling the cops. I'm getting a badge number. Now. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the 911 call button. Cassian's hand shot out and covered the phone, not grabbing it, just covering it. And what will you say, Evan? Cassian asked, his voice calm but hard. That a man you can't identify threatened you in an alley that he works for a group the city police won't touch. The officer you report this to will be on Brack's payroll before your shift ends. Your sister will be a target, and so will you. Is that what you want? So we do nothing, Evan yelled, his frustration boiling over. I didn't say that. Cassian pulled a slim, wallet-like case from his jacket. He didn't pull out a wad of cash. He pulled out a single, heavy-stock business card. It was matte black, with just a phone number and a name embossed on it. He handed it to Evan. You want to report this? You report it to him. His name is Luther Grace. He's with the BCI. He's the one who received my data package. You tell him what Brack said, word for word. You tell him what you know about the fire. You don't call the city. You call him. He's one of us. Evan looked at the card, then at Cassian, his anger being replaced by a grudging confusion. Cassian turned to me. The crisis was over, for now. The adrenaline was draining out of me, leaving a hollow, shaking void. I watched him as he spoke quietly to June. He'd faced down a top-tier enforcer for the North Pier Syndicate. He'd revealed his trump card. He'd put a target on all of our backs. He finished talking and turned back, his gaze finding mine, checking to see if I was still standing. His left hand, the one that had held Evan's phone, dropped to his side. I saw it. It was almost imperceptible. A tiny, fine tremor in his fingertips. He quickly clenched his hand into a fist, hiding it, but I'd seen it. He wasn't invincible. My God, he wasn't made of steel and ice. He had been standing there, baiting a man who burns buildings down, a man who threatens paramedics in dark alleys, and he had been afraid. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He hadn't been afraid for himself. He'd been afraid for me and for Evan. He'd put himself between us and the fire, and it had cost him something. Evan stared at the black business card as if it were a grenade. The sirens wailed, a soundtrack to our lives falling apart. Luther Grace, Evan read, his voice rough with smoke and disbelief. Rhea, this is insane. You're walking into a war. I was born in a war. Evan, I said, my voice hollow. I looked at the burning skeleton of our building, the place where I'd hidden my tip money in a shoebox, where our mother's last photos were turning to ash. This just gave it a name. I put my hands on his arms. Go, find this Mr. Grace. Tell him everything. Tell him about Dern, about Apex, about Brack threatening you. You are a witness now, too. Please, Evan, be smart. Be the paramedic, not the brawler. I need you safe. He looked at Cassian, his jaw tight with a suspicion he couldn't afford. And you're going with him. I nodded. The tremor I'd seen in Cassian's hand was a strange, terrifying anchor. He wasn't a god. He was just a man with more leverage. He's the only one with an umbrella, I said, repeating my own words from the restaurant. I'm just staying dry. Evan didn't like it, but he saw the logic. He pulled me into one last crushing hug. You call me every hour, on the hour, or I'm putting your face on every light pole in this city. I swear to God. Oh, every hour. I promised. He turned and sprinted toward his ambulance, card in hand, a man on a new mission. He's a good brother, Cassian said quietly from my side. He's all I have, I replied. Not anymore. He gestured to the sedan. Let's go. This place is no longer secure. I didn't argue. I just got in the car. The numbness was a blessing. A thick cotton batting wrapped around my brain. Joan drove us away from the flashing lights, away from the only home I had, and plunged us into the industrial heart of Port Verity. We didn't go to a glittering high-rise or a suburban mansion. We went to the docks, his docks. We passed through 3 separate, heavy-duty security checkpoints, each manned by guards in Harbor Line Protective Services uniforms, until we pulled up to a nondescript freight elevator on the side of a massive, windowless brick warehouse. The elevator opened, not into a dusty storage space, but directly into his home. It wasn't a penthouse. It was a loft, a massive, sprawling space that must have taken up the entire top floor. One wall was the original brick. The others were floor-to-ceiling armored glass, looking out over the entire working port. Cranes moved in the distance like silent, sleeping dinosaurs. The lights of the container ships glittered on the black water. It was the nerve center. The furniture was minimal, expensive, and functional. A long leather sofa, a heavy wooden desk with a bank of monitors, a Spartan kitchen. It was warm, secure, and impossibly quiet. No one knows this location but June and my personal team, Cassian said, locking the elevator behind us. You're safe here. Safe. The word felt foreign. I walked to the window, placing my hand on the glass. It was thick and cold. I could see the whole city, a smear of light in the distance, but no one could see me. I must have been wringing my hands. The soap and sanitizer from the key had left the skin around my knuckles cracked and bleeding. The stress, the cold, the fire, it was all too much. Here, he said. I turned. He was holding a small, professional-looking first aid kit. He didn't ask what was wrong, he just saw, sit. He gestured to the sofa. I obeyed, too tired to question. He sat on the heavy coffee table in front of me, not next to me. He clicked open the kit. Give me your hands. I held them out. They were still shaking, still smudged with soot from Evan's jacket. He was methodical. He took a sterile wipe and gently cleaned the cracked skin. His touch was impossibly light, the complete opposite of the force I knew he possessed. He took a roll of antiseptic tape and a small tube of salve. My mother was a nurse, he said, his voice quiet, his eyes focused on his work. She hated chapped hands, said it was a sign of a hard life you couldn't control. He carefully wrapped a small piece of tape around the joint of my forefinger, creating a protective barrier. He did this for 3 separate fingers, his movements precise and economical. It was the most tender, practical, and completely unromantic act of care I had ever experienced. As he finished with my left hand, his thumb brushed the inside of my wrist. His gaze flickered up, just for a second, to my neck. I hadn't even realized it. The faint, finger-shaped bruises from Mr. Finch grabbing me at the restaurant were probably darkening. Cashin's jaw tightened. He did that. I nodded, not needing to ask who he was. He finished taping my last finger and then stood up abruptly. He wasn't angry. He was teaching. Stand up, he commanded. I stood confused. He grabbed you from the front. He stood in front of me. What did you do? I just froze. I was trying to talk my way out of it. Wrong answer. He moved quicker than I could track, his hand clamping around my throat. It wasn't violent, it was a demonstration. The pressure was firm but not choking. He holds you like this. What do you do? My instinct was to grab his wrist, to pull. I did. His grip was like steel. You can't, he said calmly. He's stronger. Stop fighting his strength. Use yours. He guided my free hand. 2 fingers. Not the throat, the eyes, or if you can't reach, the notch. He tapped the small, soft hollow at the base of his own throat, just between the collarbones. Hard. As hard as you can. It collapses the windpipe. He'll let go. He released me. I stood there, breathing heavily, my heart hammering. Okay. No. Show me. He held up a hand, palm out. The target is my palm. Pretend it's the notch. Go. I struck it, weakly. Again, harder. You're not trying to annoy him. Rhea, you're trying to survive. I took a breath. I thought of Dern, of Finch, of Brack's dead smile. I struck his palm with my 2 fingers, a hard, fast jab. It made a loud smack in the quiet room. Good, he said, nodding, a flicker of approval in his eyes. You don't fight the bull, you blind it. Remember that. He stepped back. The lesson over. The space between us was electric, charged with something new. He hadn't just protected me, he was arming me. My stomach chose that moment to let out a loud, mortified growl. I hadn't eaten since a piece of stale toast 12 hours ago. The adrenaline had masked it, but now I was starving. A small, genuine smile touched his mouth. I think the nerves are settled, but you're running on empty. He walked to the Spartan kitchen. I don't really cook. He opened a cabinet. It was full of instant noodle cups and high-end protein bars. He pulled out 2 noodle cups and a kettle. But I can boil water. 5 minutes later, we were sitting at his kitchen island, the steam from the cheap noodle soup fogging the air between us. He'd tried to add a jar of expensive, imported chili sauce and had put in way too much. He took one bite and his eyes watered, a look of profound, stoic suffering on his face as he tried not to cough. A laugh bubbled up out of me. It wasn't a giggle. It was a real, rusty bark of a laugh, the first one in weeks. What? He asked, his voice strained from the spice. Nothing, I said, still smiling, my own noodles forgotten. It's just you can clear a restaurant and face down a killer, but you can be taken out by hot sauce. He looked at the jar, then at his soup, and a quiet laugh escaped him, too. It's concentrated. We ate in a comfortable silence. The fire from the gas stove in the kitchen was the only light in that corner, flickering warmly against the stainless steel, reflecting in his dark eyes. The fear was gone. The numbness was gone. For the first time all night, I just was... After we finished, I took our empty cups to the sink. He came and stood beside me, not helping, just being there. We both looked out the massive window at the sleeping port. You are safe here, Rhea, he said again, his voice low. No one can reach you. I turned to him. The kitchen light was behind him, casting his face in shadow, but I could see the intensity in his eyes. He was so close. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Thank you, Cassian, I whispered. I didn't know who moved first. Maybe we both did. It wasn't a desperate grab. It was a slow, deliberate drift. My eyes searched his, and I saw the question there. It was waiting, giving me the choice, giving me the control he'd just taught me how to take. I leaned in that last inch. The kiss was nothing like I'd imagined. It wasn't fire. It was water. It was drowning. It was the first full, safe breath I'd taken all day. His lips were firm and warm and hesitant for a fraction of a second before they claimed mine. My hands, the ones he'd just bandaged, found their way to his jacket, gripping the lapels like I was holding on for dear life. His hand, the one that had trembled, came up to cup my jaw, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. His other hand slid to my back, not pulling me, just holding me, steadying me. I felt the tension drain out of my shoulders, the knot of panic in my stomach finally unwinding. His suit jacket was rough under my fingers, and I felt the hard muscle of his chest beneath it, my worn-out server's cardigan, the one that smelled like old coffee, slipped off one shoulder. He deepened the kiss, a low sound in his throat, and the entire world outside that window, the fire, the threats, the syndicate, it all just dissolved. I don't know how long we stood there. The camera in my mind just cut. The next thing I knew, the fear and the exhaustion had won. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and the gray light of dawn. I was on the long, leather sofa. I didn't remember lying down. Cassian's heavy, tailored suit jacket was draped over me like a weighted blanket. I was still in my clothes from the night before, but my shoes were off, placed neatly on the floor. On the coffee table, a steaming mug of black coffee and a small, folded note. I opened it. The handwriting was strong, angular. You're safe or well rested. I sat up, pulling his jacket around me. It smelled like him, like expensive wool, and that faint, spicy scent of the chili sauce. I heard the whoosh of the private elevator. Cassian and June walked in. They were both in fresh suits, looking like they'd had 8 hours of sleep and a full breakfast. They'd been working. John was holding his tablet, his face all business. The package was authenticated, he said, not to Cassian, but to both of us. BCI has officially greenlit a task force. They're calling it Project Blue Harpoon. They're moving to seize Apex assets, but they need a primary witness to link the arson and extortion to the financial crimes. They go active in 48 hours. Cassian turned to me, his expression unreadable. The man from the kitchen last night completely gone, replaced by the boss. They have the data, so, he said, they need the human story, the leverage. They need the employee Finch tried to frame, the tenant Dern tried to burn out. They need you, Rhea. He was proposing it, asking me to be the active witness. I stood up, his jacket still clutched in my hand. The numbness was gone, the fear was gone. The girl who laughed over noodles was gone. This was the girl who survived. I'll do it, I said. John looked relieved. Cassian just watched me. But, I continued, my voice hard, I have one condition. I don't do it as your anything. I'm not your witness. I'm not your employee. I'm not Rhea Calder, protected by the Ardeno Consortium. My testimony will be my own. My name stands on its own in that file. No one knows you're involved. No one knows you're here. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet, even if I was standing on his floor. June opened his mouth to object, to explain how inefficient and dangerous that was. Cassian held up a hand. He looked at me for a long moment, then he nodded. A slow smile, one of pure respect, touched his mouth. I wouldn't have it any other way, he said. I'll be behind you, not in front of you. That was the promise. John looked frustrated but didn't argue. Fine. Then the first step is the BCI pre-interview. We've arranged a secure location for tomorrow. The Glasyard Public Forum. It's the perfect cover. I'll handle your schedule. As he spoke, he was typing on his tablet, sending the encrypted details of the meet to his internal security team, a team he trusted. Miles away, in a dark room, a burner phone vibrated. Kellen Brack picked it up. He looked at the screen, which now showed my schedule for the next day. A slow, ugly smile spread across his face. The leak wasn't from the BCI. It was from the inside. We didn't meet in the loft. The next day, the clock was already ticking. Less than 36 hours until Project Blue Harpoon went active. We met in a BCI holding room, a gray, featureless box that smelled like stale coffee and floor wax. This was my new world. The team, June said, gesturing with his tablet. He was the only familiar face. Cassian wasn't there. He was keeping his promise, staying behind me, and it felt like a cold, empty space at my back. Jun introduced them. Officer Nix Rowe, he said. A woman with tired eyes and a Port Authority jacket leaned against the wall. She looked like she worked 100 hours a week and hated every one of them. She's our BCI liaison. She knows the layout of every municipal building in this city. She'll be our eyes. And this, June continued, is Mira Sable. She's freelance. The woman sitting at the table, tapping on a laptop covered in stickers, didn't look up. I'm a digital locksmith, Mira said, her voice a dry rasp. You point me at a door. I open it. Virtual or physical? Don't call me a hacker. It's insulting. My brother, I said, speaking up. Evan, he's in... John nodded. He's our diversion. He'll be coordinating with Officer Rowe to call in a Level 3 medical safety drill at the target building. It'll be official, it'll be loud, and it will pull security. So, I said, looking at the faces, a tired cop, a prickly tech girl, and a strategist. What's the target? John tapped his screen, and a blueprint appeared on the monitor. The Port Verity Municipal Archive. It's boring, it's public, and it's where Apex Redevelopment, by law, has to file its physical quarterly ledgers. Nix pushed off the wall. The BCI has the digital trail. Kid, that's what Cassian gave them. But the North Pier is smart. The digital money goes to Apex, But the payouts, the bribes, the kickbacks to Dern, the payments to Brack, that's all done in physical checks. Logged in that book. We need the book. It's the dictionary that translates the digital crime into the physical one. It's the link, I whispered, thinking of the fire. It connects the money to the matchstick. Exactly, June said. And that's where you come in. You're not a witness today. You're a delivery driver. The plan was simple, which meant it was destined to fall apart. Mira would be in a van nearby, handling the electronics. Nix would be at her desk at the Port Authority, using her credentials to authorize Evan's medical drill, which would draw the main security guards away from their posts. I would walk in the front door. Mr. Ardeno has facilitated a temporary access pass, June said, sliding a plastic ID card across the table. It looked real. It identifies you as a courier for Portside Logistics, a consortium subsidiary. You have a package for the archives, a legal entry. Once Evan's drill pulls the guards, Nix picked up, you have a 3-minute window. Mira gets you through the e-lock on the archive room, and I'll loop the security feed. You find the ledger, you scan the pages with this. She tossed me a device that looked like a sleek black wand, and you get out. 3 minutes, I repeated. My heart was hammering. And Cassian, I asked? Is honoring his promise, June said, his face impassive. He's not in the field. This is your operation. It didn't feel like my operation. It felt like I was the bait. But I thought of Mrs. Petrov from the 4th floor, the one Evan had helped, her face covered in soot. I thought of Cassian's hand, his fingers bandaged around mine. Okay, I said, let's go get the book. 2 hours later, I was sweating in a polyester polo shirt, a Portside Logistics cap pulled low over my eyes. The box in my hands was real, filled with printer paper to give it weight. Earpiece check. June's voice crackled in my ear, impossibly clear. Mira, Nix, status. Systems are green. I'm in their network. Mira's voice rasped. Waiting for your signal, Nix said. I walked through the revolving doors of the Municipal Archive building. It smelled like dust and old paper. I swiped the card Cassian had provided. The light on the turnstile flashed green. I walked, not too fast, not too slow, toward the east wing. 2nd floor, Jun. Affirmative. Room 213. Evan is on standby. Initiating diversion in 30 seconds. I climbed the stairs. My footsteps echoed. A bored-looking security guard watched me from his desk down the hall. Now, Nix, June ordered. A high, piercing alarm suddenly split the air. Beep, beep, beep. Code silver, code silver. Medical emergency drill. All personnel to assembly point C. The guard at the desk swore, grabbed his radio, and started jogging toward the main lobby. Right past me. I just flattened myself against the wall. The invisible delivery girl. He's clear, I whispered. Mira, you're up, June said. I reached room 213, records archive. I placed my hand on the electronic lock. It was red. Working? Mira's voice hissed in my ear. It's an older system. Give me a second, pushing the bypass now. The light clicked green. I slipped inside. The door clicked shut behind me. The room was cold, dark, and filled with rolling metal shelves. Nix, the camera, June said. Loop is active, Nix replied. They're seeing an empty hallway. You've got 2 minutes. Rhea, go. I ran. Jun, the box number. Apex redevelopment to fiscal year 2024, Section 4B, Aisle 6. I found it, a simple gray cardboard box. My hands were shaking. I pulled it down, set it on the floor, and opened the lid. It was all there. Ledgers, binders, check stubs. My heart leaped. I pulled out the scanning wand Nix had given me. I'm in. I'm scanning. Good. Stay focused. You have 90 seconds left on the loop. I pulled out the main cash ledger and opened it. Dern, 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 Dern. His name was everywhere. Payments for consulting, maintenance, security fees. It was all here. Rhea, June's voice was suddenly ice. Rhea, abort now. What, I'm not done, I whispered frantically, the wand flying over the pages. Abort. We have unauthorized movement. He's not security. He's Brack. Kellen Brack is in the building. He just passed the first floor checkpoint. My blood turned to ice. The leak, the insider, Brack knew. He wasn't just guessing. He knew I was here. Rhea, get out of the room. I grabbed the binder. My first instinct was to run, to hide, but Cassian's voice echoed in my head. You don't fight the bull, you blind it. I wasn't a delivery girl. I was the witness. Running meant I was guilty. Running meant I was scared. The door handle turned. I didn't run. I stood up, tucked the scanner in my pocket, and held the Apex ledger against my chest as the door swung open. It was him, Kellen Brack. He wasn't in his leather jacket. He was in a cheap, official-looking windbreaker with a fake embroidered patch. Municipal Risk Office? He had 2 other thugs with him, dressed in the same phony uniforms. His dead eyes landed on me, then on the gray box on the floor. His lips peeled back in that shark smile. Well, look at this, he sneered. A delivery girl way off her route. Lost. Are we... My heart was a hummingbird in my chest, but my voice came out cold. This is a restricted archive, I said, my voice echoing the authority Nix had taught me. I'm checking a manifest discrepancy. I looked at his fake ID badge. You're the one who's off route. The Municipal Risk Office has no jurisdiction here. This is Port Authority property. Brack's smile faltered. Just for a second, he was surprised. He'd expected me to be halfway down the hall. We're here on an anonymous tip, he improvised, stepping into the room. Structural instability. We're locking this room down. Hand me that binder. He was here to destroy it. No, I said. The word hung in the cold air. This is official Port Authority business. I bluffed, my mind racing. I'll need to see your original work order, the paper authorization. Not just that badge. It needs to be signed by the Port Commissioner himself. I was betting he didn't have one. I was right. Those were the golden seconds. He stared at me, his mask of fake authority slipping, revealing the thug underneath. His men fanned out, blocking the door. You're clever, he hissed. Too clever. He dropped the pretense. He lunged, his hand grabbing for the ledger, his other hand grabbing my arm. You're coming with me. I tried to pull back, but his grip was iron. Get your hands off her. The voice was not in my earpiece. It was in the room. Brack froze. I froze. Cassian was standing in the doorway. He wasn't in a suit. He was in dark pants and a plain black sweater, as if he'd been dressed for action all along. He had broken his promise. He was here. Brack looked from me to Cassian, and a flash of recognition, then fury crossed his face. He shoved me hard into the metal shelves. The ledger binder flew from my hands, skittering across the floor. Brack swung at Cassian, a wild, powerful hook. Cassian didn't brawl. He moved like smoke. He ducked inside the punch, and I saw exactly what he'd taught me. It wasn't a fist, it was an elbow, driven hard into Brack's solar plexus. A sickening woof of air left Brack's lungs. As Brack doubled over, Cassian didn't follow up with another punch. He used a palm heel strike to Brack's jaw, snapping his head back. It was fast. It was brutal. It was almost silent. The 2 thugs moved in, but June was suddenly in the doorway behind Cassian. Rhea the ledger, June shouted. As Brack staggered, Cassian grabbed his wrist, twisting it in a joint lock that brought the bigger man to his knees, his face pale with pain. No guns, no knives, just leverage. A new alarm, high-pitched and frantic, shrieked through the building. This wasn't the drill. This was a fire alarm. That's Nix, June's voice yelled, this time from the hall. She pulled the real alarm. Port Patrol is inbound. We have 30 seconds. Brack looked at Cassian, then at the flashing strobe light. He couldn't be found here. Not like this. He ripped his arm free from Cassian's grip, a raw tear of fabric and cartilage. This isn't over, he snarled. Not at me, but at Cassian. You're dead. He and his men turned and sprinted down the hall, away from the main entrance, toward an emergency exit. Rhea! Cassian was at my side. Are you hurt? No. I scrambled for the ledger binder. I grabbed it. I have it. This way. He didn't grab me, and he just put his hand on my back, the same solid pressure from the night of the fire, and propelled me out of the room, down a service hallway, and into a stairwell. We burst out into the alley behind the building, into the back of Mira's waiting van. The tires squealed before the door was even closed. I was gasping, my body shaking, the adrenaline making me sick. Nix was in the passenger seat, ripping off her BCI jacket. Mira was driving like a demon. June and Cassian were in the back with me. "Did you get it?" Mira demanded. I think so." I fumbled with the binder. "Mira, the scanner. I didn't finish." "Give it." Mira took the wand and plugged it into her laptop. "I'll get what's on it. What about the book?" I opened the binder. It was all there. Page after page of damning evidence. "We got it. It's all here." "Wait," Cassian said. His voice was grim. He pointed. I looked down. One of the pages, near the back, was torn. The bottom right-hand corner was missing, ripped away. "He got to it," I whispered, my stomach sinking. "Brack, or one of his men. He must have torn it when I dropped it." The page was titled Civic Liaison Payouts. It was a list of consultants. The last entry, the one that had been torn, was just a fragment. One letter, 4 dashes, one letter. CN. "He wasn't just here to stop me," I said, looking up at Cassian. His face was a mask of cold fury. "He was here to clean up. He was here to get this piece of paper." Cassian stared at the torn page, at the 2 letters left behind. "Yes," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "He wasn't here for the witness. He was here for the real boss." The van was suffocatingly quiet on the ride back to the loft. The adrenaline from the archive room had evaporated, leaving a sour, metallic taste in my mouth. My arm throbbed where Brack had grabbed me. I held the torn ledger page, the 2 letters CN staring up at me like a mockery. We got inside, and the elevator doors slid shut, sealing the 3 of us in the silent glass box. June took the binder, murmuring something about digital forensics and cross-referencing, and disappeared into his own corner. I turned on Cassian. "You lied to me," I whispered. My voice was shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, crystallized rage. He stood by the window, his back to me, the city lights painting a silhouette. "I kept you alive." "That wasn't the promise," I snapped, throwing my wet port-side logistics cap onto the floor. "The promise was that you would be behind me, that this would be my testimony. Instead, you were in the hallway. You were in the room. If it hadn't been for the leak, your leak, from your team, Brack never would have been there. I wouldn't have needed saving. I wouldn't have been slammed into a metal shelf." I was breathing hard, pacing. He turned around slowly. His face was a mask, but his eyes were dark with something I couldn't read. "You're right," he said. The admission was so quiet, so immediate, it stopped me cold. The breach was internal. I put you in that room, and I didn't anticipate Brack moving on the same intel. I didn't guess right. I failed to keep you secure. "I don't want to be secure," I yelled, the frustration of the last 48 hours boiling over. "I want to be seen. I want my life back. I told you I just wanted the umbrella, Cassian, but you just pulled me deeper into your storm." A heavy silence fell between us. The fragile trust we'd built over ginger tea, over bandaged fingers, over spicy noodles, it was gone. Shattered like glass. He had treated me like a pawn, another asset to be moved and protected, just like Jun did. That night, I slept on the sofa. I could feel him in the room, watching me from his desk, but he never approached. The loft, which had felt like a fortress, now felt like a cage. The Cold War lasted for 2 days. We communicated through Jun. The texts between us stopped. He'd leave coffee on the counter and disappear into the city. I'd stay by the window, watching the port, a prisoner in a glass tower. I couldn't stand it. I was suffocating on his air, his protection. I needed to breathe my own. I needed to go back. My fingers trembled as I called the main number for the key. Finch was gone, arrested. The new manager, a nervous woman named Brenda, was just trying to keep the place afloat. You want to come back?" she stammered, clearly terrified. The entire staff must have heard rumors about the night the restaurant was cleared by a mob boss. "I need the hours," I said flatly. Walking back into that restaurant felt like swallowing broken glass. The other servers avoided my eyes. They thought I was a thief, or worse, that I was with Cassian. But as I tied the familiar, cheap apron around my waist, I felt a piece of myself click back into place. This was real. The ache in my feet, the smell of brine, the sting of sanitizer. The tips were cash. They were mine. They weren't a gift from a billionaire in a tower. I was earning my own oxygen again. I worked a double shift, my muscles screaming, my mind numb. I refused the car June sent for me, taking the late-night bus instead. I made a detour. I had to see my building. The smell hit me a block away. Charred wood, wet ash, and despair. The fire was out, but the building was a hollowed-out skull. A chain-link fence surrounded it. And on the fence, flapping in the night breeze, were the notices. Bright orange, final notice. All residents' property to be seized and disposed of by the city in 24 hours. I wasn't the only one. My neighbors, Mrs. Petrov from 4C, the Rodriguez family from 2A, the ones with the new baby, they were standing on the curb, next to piles of garbage bags filled with whatever they'd managed to save. They were weeping. Mr. Dern was there, flanked by 2 private security guards, his weasel face set in a smirk. "Buildings condemned, folks. Not my problem. You gotta be out." The old Rhea would have cried with them. The old Rhea would have been helpless. The new Rhea, the one who had stared down Kellen Brack in a dark archive room, got angry. I pulled out my burner phone. I didn't call Cassian. I didn't call June. I opened my social media app and I hit Go Live. The little red light blinked on. My hand was shaking, but my voice was steady. "My name is Rhea Calder," I said, my voice low and clear. I turned the camera on my face. "I used to live here, in Unit 5B, until 2 days ago, when our landlord, Mr. Dern, and his partners at Apex Redevelopment had it set on fire." Dern's head snapped up. "Hey, you can't film here." I kept the camera rolling. "This is Mr. Dern," I said, zooming in on his face. He flinched, covering his lens. "He's the man who's throwing children onto the street in the middle of the night from a building he helped burn." I panned the camera to Mrs. Petrov, who was sobbing into a handkerchief. "This is what the North Pier Syndicate looks like. This is what Apex Redevelopment calls business. They think we're invisible. They think we don't have a voice. They're wrong." I let the camera linger on the orange eviction notice. 24 hours. They burned our homes, and now they want to steal what's left. Don't let them. I ended the stream. My heart was pounding. By the time I got back to the loft, my phone was melting. The video had 10,000 views. By morning, it was over 100,000. It was on the local news. The BCI released a statement that they were monitoring the situation at Harbor Street. Apex Redevelopment's stock ticker, it wasn't good. I had hit them, me, with a phone. The next day, a fleet of clean, white moving vans pulled up to the curb. The logo on the side said Harbor Line Trust. A quiet woman in a polo shirt offered every single tenant free, indefinite, climate-controlled storage for all their belongings. They even packed the boxes. I stood across the street and watched. Harbor Line. Cassian. He was keeping his promise. He was staying behind me. He hadn't called. He hadn't texted. He hadn't taken credit. He'd just fixed it. My anger felt petty. The distance between us suddenly felt wrong. I tried to go back to work that night, but the weight of it all was too much. The live stream, the eviction, the Cold War with Cassian. I was running on fumes. I'd been awake for nearly 2 days. It started to rain, a cold, miserable Port Verity drizzle that soaked through my thin jacket. My shift ended at 2 a.m. I was standing at the bus stop, my legs aching, my feet numb, the world tilted. I didn't faint, I just collapsed. I sat down hard on the wet, filthy curb, my head in my hands. I was too tired to stand, too tired to cry, too tired to even move. My fingers were ice. I pulled out my phone. I didn't know who else to call. I texted Evan, stuck, bus stop, too tired. A minute later, my phone buzzed. A reply, not from Evan, from Cassian. Stay there, 5 minutes. I didn't have the energy to argue. 5 minutes later, the black sedan, the bank vault, pulled up to the curb. The back door opened. Cassian got out, into the rain. He wasn't wearing a coat, just a black sweater. He looked at me, sitting on the curb like a piece of trash. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say, "This is what happens when you don't take my car." He said nothing. He just bent down, slid one arm under my knees and the other behind my back, and lifted me as if I weighed nothing. I was too exhausted to fight. I just let out a sob and buried my face in his shoulder. He didn't take me to the loft. He took me to Evan's station, the paramedic triage center at the General Hospital. Evan met us at the door, his face a mask of worry. "In here," he said, leading us to the empty, dimly lit paramedic break room. Cassian laid me down on the lumpy cot. My body was shaking, a deep, bone-rattling chill. Evan was already grabbing hot packs and a thick wool blanket. "Her feet are like ice," Evan said, his paramedic brain taking over. Before Evan could do it, Cassian was kneeling on the floor. He gently, firmly, took my foot in his hands and started unlacing my soaked, ruined server shoe. He pulled it off, and my foot, blue and pale, was exposed. He did the same with the other. He didn't hesitate. He took my ice-cold feet in his warm, strong hands and started rubbing them, hard, chafing them, bringing the blood back, forcing the life and the warmth into them. It wasn't romantic. It was practical. It was necessary. It was the most profoundly intimate thing anyone had ever done for me. Tears streamed silently down my face, into the cheap cot pillow. "You shouldn't," I whispered, my voice a broken rasp. You're Cassian Ardano. You're a boss. You're supposed to be a savior, a saint." "I don't need a saint," I choked out, the truth welling up. "I don't need a white knight. I just need someone real." His hands stilled. He looked up, his dark hair plastered to his forehead by the rain, his eyes searching mine in the dim light of the break room. "I'm just a man, Rhea," he said, his voice rough. "That's all I've ever been." Evan returned, saw us, and quietly placed the blanket and hot packs on the end of the cot. He gave me a small, sad smile and backed out of the room, closing the door, leaving us alone. Cassian wrapped my feet in the warm blanket. He sat on the edge of the cot, so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. The Cold War was over, burned away by the rain. He didn't move. He just watched me. He looked at my mouth, then back to my eyes. The air was thick. "Rhea," he whispered. It wasn't a statement. It was a question. It was permission. My breath hitched. I didn't trust my voice. I just nodded, a single tiny movement. He leaned in, his hand coming up to cup my face, his thumb stroking my cheekbone. It was slow, agonizingly slow. This wasn't the desperate, drowning kiss from the loft. This was a reconciliation. This was a choice. His lips met mine, and it was just warmth, a soft, steady pressure that chased the last of the cold away. My entire body shuddered, a long, releasing sigh. My hands came up, not to his jacket, but to his wrists, holding on. His other hand slid to my waist, holding me steady. It was a kiss that said, "I see you. You are real. So am I." And for a moment, the world faded to nothing but the sound of our breathing, finally in sync. The next morning, we were back in the loft. I woke up on the sofa, but this time, he was asleep in the armchair opposite me, having refused to leave the room. We were a team again, a fragile, bruised, but real team. June arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, a tablet in his hand. He was professional enough to ignore the change in the atmosphere. "The torn page," he said, getting right to it. Mira and Nix analyzed the archives. The civic liaison payouts section almost exclusively deals with public officials. We believe C. Houghton is not a name, but part of a title, councilman. A councilman, Cassian said, his voice hard. Someone on the city council is the head of the snake. I stood up, the fog of exhaustion finally lifting, replaced by a cold, clear anger. My live stream, the public pressure. They're scared, I said. The live stream put them on the defensive. Apex is desperate to save face. They're holding a public community investment signing at the Glasyard Hall this Friday. Jun raised an eyebrow. I saw the press release. They're pledging to rebuild what they burned. The arrogance is astounding. It's not arrogance, I said, the plan forming in my head. It's an opportunity. They'll all be there. The Apex executives, the city officials, and I bet Councilman CN will be there to accept the check. Cassian looked at me, a slow, dangerous smile spreading on his face. He knew where I was going. We don't need to steal the ledger this time, I said, my voice gaining strength. We make them show us. We set a trap, right in the middle of their press conference, and we catch them all, live on camera. The Glasyard Hall was a monument to cheap luxury and bad intentions. It was all steel beams and glass panels, a sterile box designed to make corrupt city deals look transparent. I tugged at the collar of my navy blue polo shirt. Glasyard event staff was embroidered over my heart. I was invisible again, but this time it was a disguise. A clipboard was my shield, a fake earpiece my cover. In my real ear, Jun's voice was a calm, steady presence. Rhea, status. Are you at the moderator's podium? Affirmative, I whispered, my voice tight. Stage right, I have the Q&A cards. Good, Mira is patched into the house AV. Nix has eyes on the building schematic. Evan is seated, row 3, center. I glanced out at the audience. The press was in the front, sharks smelling blood they couldn't quite see. Behind them, a mix of corporate suits and a few genuine, displaced Harbor Street residents. Evan had rallied, and there, in the third row, was my brother, looking stiff in an off-duty paramedic's uniform, a concerned citizen badge pinned to his jacket. He caught my eye and gave a single, terrified nod. The lights dimmed. The mayor of Port Verity, a man with a plastic smile and empty eyes, stepped up to the podium. Today is a day of healing, he began, a day of compassionate reconstruction. I almost choked on the words, compassionate. They burned down our homes and called the ashes healing. Where is he? I murmured. Mezzanine, June replied instantly. South pillar. He's not on the comms. He's observing, as promised. I scanned the upper balconies. It took a moment to find him. Cassian wasn't watching the stage. He was leaning against a concrete pillar, a dark shape in the shadows, his phone to his ear. He was watching the crowd, watching the exits. He was a silent, lethal overwatch. He was staying behind me, but his eyes were on me. The mayor finished his empty speech and introduced the CEO of Apex Redevelopment, a man who oozed false sincerity. He talked about community reinvestment and building a new, stronger Port Verity. Rhea, target acquired. Mira's voice crackled in my ear, sharp and focused. Back of the hall, near the west exit. I saw him, Mr. Dern. He looked like a rat in a tuxedo, sweating under the lights, trying to look like he belonged. The Apex CEO finished his speech to polite, confused applause. He stepped off the stage, shaking the mayor's hand, and walked directly toward Dern. They're meeting, I whispered, my hand tightening on the clipboard. I see it, Nani. Mira said. The handoff. It's an envelope. Standard white, number 10. The CEO patted Dern on the shoulder, a friendly, public gesture. But the envelope passed from his hand to Dern's. Dern, clumsy and nervous, quickly slipped it into his inner jacket pocket. Got it, Mira said, a note of triumph in her voice. Macro lens. The envelope has a clear window. I got a perfect shot of the check. Payee Dern. Memo Civic consulting fee. And the serial numbers? They're a direct sequence match to the offshore account transfers from the ledger we scanned. We have the physical link. The bribe is on camera. Evan, June's voice was cold. You are green. The moderator opened the floor to the pre-selected questions. As planned, My clipboard had Evan listed first. Evan stood up, his voice, trained to cut through the chaos of a crisis, filled the hall. Mr. Mayor, my name is Evan Calder. I'm a paramedic. I was one of the first responders at the Harbor Street fire. How can you stand there and talk about compassionate reconstruction when the victims of that arson, my neighbors, are being served final eviction notices by the same company you are partnering with today? A wave of murmurs rippled through the hall. The press sat up, their pens flying. The mayor stammered, his plastic smile cracking. Yes, we are, of course, looking into all irregularities concerning that tragic incident. The Apex CEO stepped up to the mic, his face pinched in annoyance. That is an unfortunate but completely separate legal matter, which is being handled by... If I could ask a follow-up? I stepped forward to the moderator's microphone. My voice was amplified, echoing through the huge room, clear and polite. Every eye in the room turned to me, the invisible staff girl. The CEO looked annoyed. This is for pre-screened questions only. It's a clarifying question, sir, for the Apex financial officer, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'm just a staffer, but I was looking over the public-facing proposal and I saw a line item for neighborhood outreach. I was hoping you could clarify for the residents, does that outreach include the forced security fees, mister? Dern was charging tenants fees that, in your own internal ledgers, were listed under civic liaison payouts. I'm just wondering if forcing residents to pay illegal fees that are then funneled directly back to your company, is that a standard part of compassionate reconstruction? Dead silence. The mayor went pale. Dern, in the back, looked like he was about to be sick. The Apex CEO stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He saw his career flashing before his eyes. The press in the front row exploded into motion. That is an that's a slanderous allegation, the CEO sputtered. This woman is She's security. Get her off the stage. We have a problem. June's voice, suddenly sharp, cut through my rising triumph. Rear entrance, AV booth. It's Brack. He has a team. 506 of them. They're in suits, not security. I looked. I saw him. Kellen Brack, moving with deadly purpose along the side wall, heading straight for the media control room. He's going for the power, Nix's voice snapped. He's going to kill the feed. He's cutting the broadcast. The words were barely out of her mouth when the hall was plunged into absolute darkness. The microphones died. The sound of hundreds of people gasping, then screaming, filled the void. Whump! A second later, the room was flooded with light, but it wasn't the warm, white stage light. It was a cold, harsh, industrial blue. The emergency generators. Nix, I whispered, blinded. The backup generator is on a separate circuit, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. And I may have swapped the main bulbs in the emergency fixtures this morning. Project Blue Harpoon is officially live and on every camera feed. The signal. The main doors of the Glasyard Hall burst open, not with a crash, but with a smooth, silent whoosh. It wasn't a SWAT team. It wasn't city police. It was Luther Grace from the BCI. He was flanked by a dozen agents in crisp, dark blue windbreakers. They moved like surgeons, silent, focused, and organized. Ladies and gentlemen, Grace's voice boomed, calm and authoritative. Please remain seated. This is not an emergency. It is a civil investigation by the Bureau of Civic Integrity. We are here to seize all materials, records, and digital devices related to the Apex Redevelopment Public Fund. The press was frozen, their cameras flashing, capturing the most polite, terrifying corporate raid in Port Verity history. The BCI agents didn't pull guns. They didn't shout. They walked past the press, past the mayor, and straight to the Apex CEO, to Dern, and to a third man in a perfectly tailored suit who had been sitting in the front row, the councilman. The agents held out clear, plastic evidence bags. Sir, your phone, your tablet, your laptop, now. They weren't seizing people. They were seizing data. The entire operation was being broadcast, live, in stark, unforgiving blue light. I had done it. We had done it. I was standing there, my clipboard forgotten, tears welling in my eyes. A hand clamped down on my bicep, hard as a steel trap. "You," a voice hissed in my ear. "Kellen Brack." He had emerged from the AV booth, his face a mask of primal fury. He had failed, and I was the reason. "You're the fuse," he snarled. He yanked me backward off the stage, through a staff-only door, and into a sterile, white service corridor. "Let me go," I twisted, jabbing my fingers toward his throat. The move Cassian had taught me. He was ready. He batted my hand away like it was a fly and shoved me forward. "You're not getting out of this." He was dragging me, my sensible shoes skidding on the polished floor. We burst through another set of doors and onto the sky bridge, a long glass and steel tube suspended 20 stories above the street, connecting the hall to the parking garage. It was empty. The city lights glittered below, a beautiful, dizzying void. "You cost my employers everything," Brack snarled. He shoved me hard against the outer glass wall. The entire bridge seemed to shudder. My back screamed in protest. He grabbed my hair, pulling my head back. "Let her go, Kellen." The voice was not in my ear. It was at the other end of the bridge, echoing in the glass tube. Cassian. He was standing at the entrance to the parking garage, blocking our only exit. He was alone. No Jun, no guards. Just him, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened. Brack laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. He yanked me back, using my body as a shield, his forearm pressing hard against my throat. "You again, you're everywhere, aren't you? How'd you even get here so fast, Fly?" "The railing," Cassian said, his voice flat. I looked back. He hadn't used the stairs. He hadn't waited for an elevator. He climbed over the mezzanine balcony, dropped 10 feet to the concourse below, and sprinted across. "You're impressive," Brack sneered. "I'll give you that, but you're alone, and I've got your girl." "She's not my girl," Cassian said, taking a slow step forward. "She's my associate, and you're going to take your arm off her neck." "Or what?" Brack tightened his grip, pulling me off my feet. "You'll stop me. Stay back, one more step and she goes through the glass." Cassian stopped, maybe 20 feet away. He slowly raised his hands, palms out, showing they were empty. "You touch her," he said. His voice was quiet, but it was colder than the steel frame of the bridge. It was the voice of absolute, final authority. "You bruise her. You even breathe on her wrong. And you aren't dealing with the BCI. You're not dealing with the cops. You are dealing with the Ardeno Consortium. You are dealing with the Harbor Line, the docks, and every union man in this city. You are dealing with me." He took another step. "Touching her," he said. His eyes locked on Brack's. "Is touching all of it. It's touching me." The bluff, the bravado, the thuggery, it all evaporated from Brack's face. He was a bully. Cassian was a boss. And in that glass tunnel, suspended above the city, the difference was everything. Behind us, I heard the sound of footsteps, of shouting. Nix, Evan, the BCI was catching up. Brack was trapped. With a roar of pure frustration, he shoved me hard to the floor. I collapsed onto the polished tile, gasping. "Fine, Haver," he spat. Brack backed away, toward Cassian, toward the parking garage exit. Cassian didn't move. He just watched him, a predator, letting his prey exhaust itself. Brack stopped just before he reached the door, his face twisting into a new, poisonous smile. He had lost, but he had one more card to play, one more piece of venom. "You think you're smart, Ardeno," he spat, his voice dripping with malice. "You think you've got this all locked down, but you're sloppy. You're leaking." "Get out," Cassian said, his voice low. "I wasn't even supposed to be in that archive room," Brack sneered, savoring the moment. "I wasn't supposed to know about the Glasyard event tonight. How do you think I knew your exact plan? How do I know where to be? Every single time?" Cassian's face, which had been a mask of cold control, tightened. I saw the realization dawn on him. Brack laughed. Your own person sold you out. Cassian sold her out. He pointed at me. Someone right at the top. Someone in your ear the whole time. That little tech girl, the BCI cop, maybe even your right-hand man. He smiled, a final, victorious leer. Have fun figuring out which one it is. He turned and vanished into the darkness of the parking garage. Evan and Nix were suddenly there, helping me up. Rhea, are you okay? Are you hurt? I couldn't answer. I just stared at Cassian. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't looking at the exit where Brack had fled. He was staring at the city lights, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his face carved from ice. He was replaying every call, every text, every private conversation. Jun? Mira? Nix? One of his own. One of ours. The person who had been protecting me had just tried to get me killed. The ride back to the loft was a funeral. No one spoke. June drove, his eyes straight ahead, his face an unreadable, perfect mask. Nix and Mira had been dismissed at the scene, vanishing back into their respective shadows. It was just me and Cassian in the back of the sedan, a 3-foot chasm of cold air and suspicion between us. Brack's final words echoed in the silence. Your own person sold you out. The elevator ride up to the loft was suffocating. The whoosh of the doors opening was the loudest sound I'd heard in an hour. Jun went straight to the bank of monitors, his fingers flying, pulling up security logs, communication records. He was the perfect strategist, already hunting the breach. I just stood in the middle of the room. I was still wearing the events staff polo. I felt contaminated. Cassian was at the window, his back to us, just as he'd been after the archive room. But this time, his posture wasn't angry. It was defeated. It was one of them, I said, my voice flat. Jun, Mira, Nix. Yes, Cassian said, not turning. Mira, I reasoned, thinking aloud. She's freelance. Her loyalty is to the highest bidder. She had access to the comms, the AV, everything. She could have fed the info to Brack in real time. She's a possibility, Jones said from his desk, his voice tight. Or Nix, I continued, the cold dread settling in. She's BCI, but she's also Port Authority. She's been playing both sides for years. Maybe she's not a double agent for us. Maybe she's a triple agent for them. She set up the safe routes. She knew the blind spots. She fed us to Brack. June stopped typing. Or, Cassian said, his voice a low gravel, it's the one we'd never suspect, the one with access to everything, my right hand, the man who's been at my side for 10 years. John flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. He turned from his desk, his face pale, but his eyes were steady. I understand the suspicion, sir. It is logical. The air was poison. The 3 people who had formed our entire team were now the 3 prime suspects. The trust was gone. This ends, Cassian said, finally turning from the window. His face was carved from granite. This whole thing, it ends now. I'm pulling you out, Rhea. What? I stared at him, bewildered. We just won. We have the BCI raid. We have the press. We have them on the run. And we have a traitor who knew every move we were going to make. He cut me off, his voice raw. Brack was in that hall to kill you. He was in that archive to grab you. I put you in the line of fire. I put the target on your back by bringing you into my circle. And my circle is compromised. I won't do it again. It's over. I'll get you out of Port Verity. A new name, a new life. The BCI can handle the rest. He was doing it again, benching me, protecting me by erasing me. The anger that rose in me was hot and pure. No, I said. He looked at me, his eyes dark. This isn't a discussion, Rhea. No, I stepped toward him, my hands clenched. You don't get to do that. You don't get to pull me from the fire, teach me how to fight, and then throw me on a plane when it gets too hard. You said it yourself. I'm your associate, not your package. I'm not running. Rhea, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're the prize. Cassian, the traitor isn't selling me out. They're selling you out. They're using me to get to you. If you remove yourself, if you retreat, you just give them more incentive to grab me to lure you back. You're not protecting me. You're just making me bait. I jabbed a finger at the window, at the city below. This is my city. This is my home they burned. This is my life they tried to frame. I am seeing this through to the end, either with you or despite you. He stared at me for a long, heavy moment. The granite in his expression cracked. He saw the girl from the curb, the girl from the archive, the girl from the press conference. He saw me. "So what do we do?" he asked. His voice quiet. He was asking, not telling. "We're blind. We can't trust our tech, our intel, or our strategist." "So we get new intel," a voice said. Luther Grace stepped out of the private elevator. Cassian and June both tensed, but I didn't. I'd called him from the sky bridge, right after Evan had helped me up. "You called him?" Cassian asked, his eyes narrowing. "You needed an ally outside your circle," I said. "He's BCI. He's the one person we know isn't on the payroll." Grace nodded, his face grim. "Miss Calder is right. You're compromised. But Brack's little speech gave us an idea. He's arrogant. He's counting on his inside source. So we're going to use it." He looked at June, then at me. "The BCI is setting a trap, a digital honeypot. We've created 3 different versions of the next move against the councilman. All 3 are highly classified, all plausible. Plan A," Grace continued, "is a data seizure at his downtown office. Plan B is a financial freeze of his offshore accounts. Plan C is a meet with a supposed second whistleblower at Pier 9, tonight. You'll feed a different plan to each suspect." I realized, my heart hammering. "Exactly," Grace said. "June will get Plan A, Mira will get Plan B, and Officer Nix Rowe will be given the details for the meet at Pier 9. "You're baiting the hook," Cassian said, his voice flat. "We just have to see which fish bites," Grace finished. "My teams will be monitoring all 3 locations. The second Brack's men move on one of them. We have our traitor." The rest of the day was the worst kind of waiting. The gray dawn broke over the harbor, and the loft felt like a tomb. At 6 p.m., Grace's burner phone, which he'd left on the coffee table, buzzed. He picked it up, listened, and hung up. "Pier 9, he said, his voice heavy. "North Pier assets are moving into position right now. They're setting up a counter-ambush for our whistleblower." "Nix." My stomach sank. The tired eyes, the bitter attitude, it had all been a lie. She'd been playing us from the start. "She sold us out, Cassian said, his voice pure ice. "She sold you out." His fury was a palpable thing, cold and sharp. "Jun, get the Harbor Line team. We're going to Pier 9. We're not just finding her. We're extracting her." "No," I said. Cassian turned, his patience gone. "Rhea, this is not a negotiation. She's a traitor who nearly got you killed. She is an enemy." "Why?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why would she do it? She's BCI. She had a clean record. It doesn't make sense. Money. It can't just be money." "It's always money," Cassian bit out. "But what if it's not?" I pleaded. "What if it's leverage? What if they have something on her, the same way Dern had leverage on me? You're going in hard. Cassian, you're going to treat her like an enemy, and she'll stay an enemy. We'll get her, but we'll lose. We'll lose the why. We'll lose the rest of the intel." "What are you suggesting?" Grace asked, intrigued. "I'm suggesting we find out why," I said, my mind racing. "Don't go in hard. Don't go in at all. Let her think her plan is working. Then we find her. Not at Pier 9. At her home. Before she can run." It was a risk. A huge one. But Cassian looked at me. At the plea in my eyes. He was seeing the girl he'd rubbed the warmth back into her feet. He was seeing the human angle. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Grace, your team stands down from Pier 9. Let Brack's men freeze in the dark. Jun, find her home address. We'll pay her a visit. My way, but soft." An hour later, we were standing outside a small, run-down apartment in the city's worst neighborhood. This wasn't the home of a cop on the take. This was the home of someone drowning. Cassian picked the cheap lock in under 10 seconds. We slipped inside. The apartment was dark, bare. We heard a sound from the bedroom, a small click. "Nix," Cassian said, his voice calm, filling the small space. She stepped out. She wasn't in her BCI jacket. She was in sweats, her face pale, streaked with tears. She was holding a burner phone, and it was glowing with a single text. Pier 9. Nobody showed. What went wrong? She wasn't holding a gun. She just stood there, her body trembling, her eyes wide with terror. She wasn't a traitor. She was a victim. "They have him," she whispered, the words tumbling out. "They have my brother, my little brother. He's just a kid, 19. He got mixed up. Some gambling debts, the North Pier. They took him. They said they'd hurt him unless I did what they said." She looked at me, her eyes begging. "The archive. Brack wasn't supposed to hurt you. He was just supposed to get the page, the one with the name. Tonight they told me if I didn't deliver the whistleblower, they'd oh God." She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing, a broken, terrified woman. Cassian looked at me, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. His enemy was just a desperate sister, just like Evan. I knelt beside her. "Where? Nix. Where do they have him?" "A warehouse," as she choked out. "An Apex property. Off the main dock. A chromatography lab. They use it to process chemicals for their front companies." I looked up at Cassian. His face was set. He'd made a decision. "You're going to teach me how to be flexible, aren't you?" "Rhea," he asked, his voice rough. "No," I said, standing up, my resolve hardening. "I'm going to teach you how to win sustainably. We don't burn our assets, Cassian. We flip them." He gave a short, sharp nod. He was all in. "Jun, get the Harbor Line team, not the tactical unit, the inspection unit, the ones with the white vans and the hazardous materials logos. We're not raiding a warehouse. We're performing a surprise chemical safety audit." 20 minutes later, I was in a white van, my hair tucked into a Harbor Line chemical safety baseball cap, a clipboard in my hand. My heart was pounding, but it was a different kind of fear. It was the fear of a performer, not a victim. We pulled up to the warehouse. 2 bored, armed North Pier thugs stood by the door. "What is this?" one of them growled as our team, in matching white hazmat-style polos, piled out. I stepped forward, my clipboard held high. "Sir, I'm lead technician Calder. We've had an anonymous flag from the city registrar about an unregistered precursor specifically. Toluene being stored at this facility. We're here for a mandatory spot check on your chemical manifests and storage protocols, unless you'd like me to call the Port Authority and have your operating license suspended." I was throwing out words I'd barely heard of, but I said them with the bored, absolute authority of a government official. The guard hesitated. He didn't want to call his boss about a Toluene spot check. "Fine," he grumbled. "Make it fast." We walked in. Cassian and June were in the back, dressed as technicians. "My team will check the primary storage," I said. "I'll need to see your main chemical log, now." I kept the 2 guards tangled in a web of bureaucratic nonsense. "Your Class 3 flammables are stored too close to your oxidizers. This ventilation is not up to code," while Cassian and June's team moved to the back office, where Nick said they were holding her brother. It was over in 3 minutes, a single, muffled shout. No shots. Cassian's voice came over my hidden earpiece. "We have the package. Wrap it up. Technician." I nodded at the guards. "Your manifests are a mess, but you're clean for now. Expect a full audit next week." We walked out, got in our vans, and drove away. We met Nix at a secure location. The back door of the van opened, and her brother, a terrified kid with a black eye, stumbled out. Nix ran to him, sobbing, holding him. She turned to us, her face a mask of shame and profound gratitude. I don't know I owe you his life. I owe you everything." "You owe us the North Pier," Cassian said, his voice not unkind. "I can do better than that," she said, her voice turning hard. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small, encrypted hard drive. "This was my insurance. I was terrified they'd kill us both, even if I cooperated. It's everything, the real ledger, the one they keep off site. Every name, every bribe, every account, unredacted. We were back in the loft an hour later. Mira, cleared of suspicion, was working her magic on the drive. June stood beside her. "I'm in," Mira said, her voice awed. This is the Holy Grail. Oh my God." She pulled up the file, the torn page from the archive, but this one was whole. Civic liaison payouts, Dern. A $5,000 Mo Apex internal $150,000 Creston. R $500,000 consulting fee. Glass-Yard project. "Creston," I whispered. "Councilman Robert Creston. That's him. The man in the front row, the head of the snake." We finally had him. We had his name, Councilman Robert Creston. The name hung in the air of the loft, heavy and toxic. It wasn't just a name. It was the key. The man in the front row at the Glass-Yard, the one who had been shaking the mayor's hand, the one who looked like old money and civic duty. He was the one pulling Dern's strings, the one funding Apex, the one who had Kellen Brack on a leash. Mira and June were ecstatic, their voices a low buzz of strategy and counter-strategy. Planning the BCI handover, we had him, we had the drive, we had the whole ledger. Cassian was silent. He stood by the window, watching the harbor, his hands clasped behind his back. He waited until June and Mira had left, taking the drive to their own forensics lab to make a final, secure copy for Luther Grace. The elevator doors whooshed shut, leaving just the two of us. "It's over, Rhea," he said, his voice quiet. I looked at him, confused by his tone. "We won. We have his name." "You have his name," he corrected me. Turning from the window, his face was grim, the victory in the room completely erased. "And he's not the North Pier. He's not a thug like Brack. He's the city. He's woven into the fabric of this place. The BCI can move on him, yes, but a man like Creston, he has armies you've never seen. Legal, political, he won't stop. He can't afford to stop." He walked over to me, his expression harder than I'd ever seen it. "This morning, I offered you a key. Tonight, I'm offering you a plane. The BCI has the drive. They have Nix's testimony. They have you." "What?" "I can have you in a new city, with a new name, by sunrise," he said. "Your testimony is on that drive. Your part is done. Let Grace and the BCI finish the fight. You've earned your peace." I stared at him. The old Rhea, the one from a week ago, would have wept with gratitude. She would have taken the ticket and run. But he hadn't saved the old Rhea. He'd forged a new one. "You taught me how to strike the notch," I said, my voice low and shaking, but not with fear. "You taught me how to stand up to a man who had his hands on my throat. You taught me how to bluff a room full of killers, how to trade a life for a life. You don't get to teach me how to be a warrior and then tell me to run from the final battle." I walked past him, to the vast glass window, looking down at my city. "I am not running from my home," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I'm not leaving until Councilman Creston is in handcuffs and my neighbors have their homes back. I am not a loose end you can tie up and send away. Cassian, I am the fuse. I started this, and I am going to be here to see it end." I expected him to argue, to command, to pull rank as the man who had saved my life a dozen times over. Instead, he just stood there. The silence stretched, thick with the oncoming storm. When he spoke, his voice was rough with an emotion I couldn't place. "Then I guess you're not leaving." The fight was over, not the one with Creston, the one between us. He had finally, completely, seen me. The tension of the last few days, the whodunit, the near death on the sky bridge, it all just snapped. I was exhausted, but for the first time, I wasn't alone in it. The rain started, a gentle tapping against the glass that quickly grew into a roar, lashing the windows of the loft. We didn't talk about the BCI. We didn't talk about Creston. There was nothing left to say. The final move was on the board. He just stayed. He sat on the sofa, not the chair opposite, but beside me, It was quiet, just the sound of the rain and our breathing. "You're safe," he whispered, his hand finding mine on the leather cushion. It was true. Here, in the eye of the hurricane, with the most powerful man in the city about to hunt me down, I felt safe. "For the first time in my life," I whispered back, my fingers lacing with his. "I think I am." I leaned my head against his shoulder. His arm came around me, pulling me in. This wasn't the desperate, drowning kiss from the first night. This wasn't the frantic, reconciling kiss from the break room. This was something else. This was slow. This was a choice. He moved, his other hand coming up to cup my jaw, his thumb brushing my skin. His eyes searched mine, asking the same question he'd asked in the rain. I nodded. The kiss was a relief. It was the end of a long, terrible road. It was the whisper of my name against his lips, the feeling of his hands, strong and sure, on my back, holding me up, not just holding me down. I felt his defenses. The walls of ice he'd built around himself for years just melt under my touch. The world outside, the rain, the port, the coming war, it all faded to a dull roar. There was only the warmth of his skin, the steady beat of his heart under my palm, and the feeling of finally being able to breathe. I woke to gray light and the smell of coffee. I was on the sofa, covered by a blanket I didn't remember. He was gone, but the sound of the shower was running in the other room. On the coffee table, next to a fresh mug, was a single, heavy key. I picked it up. It wasn't a normal house key. It was old, brass, and shaped like a ship's anchor. Beneath it, a small note, his strong, angular handwriting. "Not ownership, just access. This is your harbor, whenever you want it." My harbor. My fingers trembled as I slid the key onto the thin silver chain I always wore, the one that had been my mother's. It rested heavy and warm against my chest. He emerged, dressed in a fresh suit, the boss back in place, but his eyes were different. They were softer. "It's time," I said, my voice steady. The BCI handover was a masterpiece of paranoia. Joan drove a decoy car. Mira ran a digital ghost signal from the loft, making it look like we were still there. I went with Nix. She was now Luther Grace's star witness, her brother safe in a BCI protective detail. We drove in a standard, boring BCI sedan to the safe hub, a concrete bunker of a building downtown. I walked into the sterile debriefing room. Luther Grace stood there, his face grim. I placed the hard drive on the table between us. "It's all there," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "The real ledger, Nix's testimony, the link from the fire to Apex, and the name, Councilman Robert Creston." It was done. I had handed over the bomb. I stepped back, feeling hollow. We were in the debriefing room for less than an hour when Jun burst in, his face white. He didn't knock. "He knows." "What?" Grace snapped. "Creston," June said, his voice clipped. "He's not stupid. The second Nix's brother vanished and she went dark. He knew he was compromised. He's liquidating. My port sources are lighting up. He's pulling every asset he has. He knows the drive is gone. He knows he's exposed." We were in the car, racing back to the loft, the world blurring past the windows. Cassian was on the phone when we walked in, his back to us, his voice a low, lethal command. "I don't care what it takes. Find him." He hung up and turned. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Creston isn't just running. He's cleaning house. He's activated BRAC. He's going after the source of the problem." "Me?" I whispered. "No," Cassian said, his eyes finding mine. They were terrifying. "Worse. He's going after the story. He's targeting the key." My blood ran cold. My old job. Joan was already at his monitor, his fingers flying. "Creston is panicked. He's not just trying to kill the witness. He's trying to create a new narrative, a new truth to muddy the water before the BCI can strike." He read the intel off the screen. A disgruntled employee, distraught over her public framing, returns to her former workplace to make a statement. He's sending BRAC to the key tonight, during the dinner rush. He's going to burn it down. Or worse, and he's going to pin it on you. He's cutting the head off the witness, I said, my voice numb, and burning the evidence of where it all began. He's erasing the whole story. Cassian walked to his closet. He didn't reach for a weapon. He took out the perfectly tailored black suit from the first night, the one he'd worn when I'd first seen him. He wants to rewrite the beginning, Cassian said, his voice deadly quiet as he buttoned his jacket. He wants a new first act for his play. Fine. He turned, and the man who had held me by the fire, the man who had left me the key, was gone. The boss was back. He wants to go back to that night, Cassian said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. I'll take him there. The first night you met me, Rhea, you called me rude. You thought I was a monster just for clearing a room. He adjusted his cuffs, his eyes like polished steel. Tonight I'll be rude for real. I'm going to clear that room again, but this time, it's not a drill. This time, we're going to shatter his entire play. He was walking to the door. He was going to save the day. He was going to face Brack and Creston's men. And he was leaving me here, in the safe harbor. Get the car, Jun, he ordered. I'm coming with you, I said, pulling on my own jacket. He stopped, his hand on the elevator button. Rhea, no, this is not a debate. You are the target. You will stay here. Where you are safe. That is final. It's my life he's trying to rewrite, I snapped, stepping in front of him. It's my restaurant. It's my name he's going to put on the news tomorrow. He thinks he can just burn my world down, piece by piece, the apartment and now the keno. I looked him straight in the eye, my reflection staring back at me in his dark pupils. If they are coming to burn that part of my life to the ground, I am going to be there to meet them. I'm not hiding. Not anymore. He stared at me for a long, heavy 10 seconds. The argument was over. He saw the anchor around my neck. He saw the woman he'd helped create. He didn't smile. He just gave a single, sharp nod. All right, he said. Then we go together. We stepped out of the elevator, into the cold night air. The rain was driving now, a biblical deluge that swept across the docks. We didn't run to the sedan. We just walked, side by side, into the storm. He didn't speak. He just reached out and took my hand. His grip was iron. It wasn't a caress. It wasn't gentle. It was a vow. At the end, be there. The key looked exactly the same. Friday night, 8 p.m., packed. The clink of glasses, the smell of butter and brine, the low murmur of Port Verity's elite pretending their lives weren't built on the mud of the harbor. But tonight, I wasn't a waitress. I was the ghost at the feast. I was in a staff uniform, but my real work was already done, tucked behind a decorative, dusty ficus plant near the kitchen door. A small, high-definition camera was live. My burner phone, linked to it, was streaming directly to a community watchdog channel Mira had set up. The feed was titled, A Compassionate Reconstruction Live from the Quay. The trap was set. Kellen Brack and 3 of his thugs were already here. They weren't diners. They were in the pantry, wearing the same municipal risk office windbreakers they'd worn at the archive. They'd told the manager they were doing a surprise safety inspection. They were planting a thermal device, a fire starter, in the dry goods storage, miles away. Councilman Creston was waiting by his phone, ready to hear the boom, ready to spin the story of the disgruntled, dangerous ex-waitress. But he wasn't the only one with a team. Joan was by the service entrance, a shadow in a busboy's uniform. Mira was at the bar, nursing a club soda, a high-gain signal jammer the size of a phone in her purse. And Cassian was at the best table in the house, the window seat. He was with 3 of his Harbor Line executives, all of them dressed like they were closing a billion-dollar shipping deal. They were just eating. They were diners, invisible. Brack emerged from the pantry, wiping his hands, a smug look on his face. He nodded to his men, who fanned out toward the exits. He pulled out his phone, no doubt to text Creston that the inspection was complete. That was the signal. Cassian stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He picked up his champagne flute and tapped it with a knife. A clear, Ringing ching cut through the restaurant's buzz. The room went silent. Every eye turned to him, the man at the window seat. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cashin said, his voice calm, projecting perfectly across the room. "My apologies for interrupting your meal." He looked around, a small, polite smile on his face. "There appears to be a minor safety concern with the building's kitchen. For your own comfort and security, I must insist that everyone evacuate immediately." A murmur of annoyance went up. "Please," Cassian continued, "head to the main exit in an orderly fashion. My staff," he gestured to his men who were already standing, "will be at the door." A banker type stood up. "This is ridiculous. I'm not leaving. My steak just arrived." Cashin's polite smile vanished. "Tonight's bill," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice that cleared this room the first time. "For everyone is on me. You have 60 seconds. Get out, now." This time, there was no confusion. That was the voice of pure, unadulterated command, panic, gratitude, and confusion warred as chairs scraped. People grabbed their coats. It was an orderly stampede. Brack was frozen. His face a mask of disbelief. His plan, his narrative, it was evaporating in front of him. The restaurant was emptying. His disgruntled employee was nowhere to be seen. And his tragic fire was about to happen in an empty room. He snarled, his hand going to the phone. He was going to light it anyway. "Mira, now," I whispered into my own calm. "Jamming," Mira's voice came back. Brack mashed the button on his phone. Nothing. He tried again. The signal was dead. He looked around, panicked, and his eyes, they found me. I was standing near the hostess podium, by my hidden camera. He knew. He pointed at me, then at the pantry. "You, stop her, light it manually," he roared to his men. He was running for me. His men were running for the pantry. But I was already moving. I wasn't running from the pantry. I was running to it. I heard Cassian shout my name, a roar of pure terror. But I was already through the swinging doors. The pantry was dark. On the shelf, tucked behind a 20-pound bag of flour, was the device. A small box with a glowing red thermal trigger. It was counting down. 10 seconds. You don't fight the bull. You blind it. My hands were shaking, but I saw the wires. A simple heat plate trigger. Cassian had drilled me on this. It's not a bomb. Rhea, it's an oven. You just have to unplug it. I grabbed the battery pack, ripping the wires free from the terminal with a scream of effort and a shower of sparks. The red light died. I stood there, gasping, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest, the smell of ozone filling my nostrils. Clever little girl. Brack's voice. He was in the doorway, blocking the only exit. His men were fanned out behind him in the kitchen. "You've been a thorn in my side since night one," he hissed, stalking toward me. "Creston wants you gone. He wants a fire. I'm going to give him both." He grabbed a heavy steel pot from a hook. "This is going to be messy." "Rhea, get out of there." It was Evan. My blood turned to ice, and he was in the kitchen in his paramedic uniform, his face pale. I heard the call a safety concern I came to. He saw Brack. He saw the pot in his hand. "Evan, no run," I screamed. But Brack was faster. He dropped the pot and grabbed my brother, yanking him back, his thick forearm clamping around Evan's neck, the exact way he'd held me on the sky bridge. "Stay back, hero," Brack snarled at his men, who were now pointing weapons at June and Cassian's team at the other end of the kitchen. A standoff. "Everyone drop it," Brack yelled, his voice echoing off the tile. "Or the paramedic gets it. You camera girl, you trade, you for him. Now." He was dragging Evan out, back into the main dining room. He didn't know the live stream was still running. I walked out, my hands up. Okay, let him go." "Rhea, don't," Evan choked out. "Shut up," Brack slammed Evan's head against a pillar, right in the center of the empty dining room, right in perfect view of my hidden camera. Cassian was there, at the edge of the kitchen, his face a mask of pure, murderous rage. Jun was beside him. They were blocked. "This is it, then," Brack sneered, his arm still tight around Evan's throat. "You wanted to be the star. Rhea. You wanted to be on camera. Here's your final scene." "Let him go, Brack," Cassian said, his voice deadly calm. He stepped into the dining room, his hands raised, palms out. "Stay back, Ardeno," Brack yelled. "I'll snap his neck, I'll do it." "You could," Cassian agreed, his voice reasonable. He was on camera now, too. "But what's the payout Creston has done? Your money is gone." "You're lying." "Am I?" Cassian tilted his head. "Right now, this very second, every television station in Port Verity and the BCI's main server is receiving a data packet. It's called Project Blue Harpoon. It has Nix's testimony. It has the entire unredacted North Pier ledger. It has the check stubs from the glass yard. It has Councilman Creston's name on it and yours." Brack's face went white. "Mira," Cassian said, his voice casual, "you feel like hitting send." "Uploading now, boss," Mira's voice called out from the bar. "So you have two choices. Kellentus," Cassian said, taking another slow step forward, a picture of calm. "You can harm that man, a city paramedic, on a live feed and add that to the mountain of charges you'll be facing. Or you can drop your well. Drop him, and you can walk out that front door. I'll even give you a 30-second head start. You can try to outrun the BCI. It's your choice, the bullet or the trial." Brack was shaking. He was trapped. He looked at Evan, at me, at Cassian. He looked at the front door. With a roar of fury, he threw Evan to the floor. "Fine, you win, take him." He threw his hands up, faking surrender, his eyes wide. I'm unarmed." He looked pathetic. He looked broken. Cassian relaxed, his shoulders dropping. "John, call the BCI. Tell them we have a runner." It was a perfect trap, and Brack was too smart for it. As he turned, seemingly in defeat, he lunged, not at Cassian, at me. I hadn't seen the knife. It was in his boot, a thin, wicked blade. He moved faster than I could have ever believed. "Rhea?" Cassian's voice was a scream. He moved, covering the 10 feet between us in a single bound. He didn't try to stop the arm. He just put his body in the way. I felt a spray of warmth across my face. Brack's arm, which had been aimed at my heart, was buried to the hilt in Cassian's left shoulder. Cassian didn't even grunt. His eyes, full of shock and impossible pain, were locked on mine. Brack tried to pull the knife back, to strike again, but Cassian's right hand clamped onto his wrist. "Stop fighting his strength. Use yours." I didn't scream. I acted. I drove my 2 fingers, as hard as I possibly could. Not at Brack's throat, but at the pressure point on his wrist, the one Cassian had shown me, a sharp, violent jab. Brack screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure agony, as his nerves lit up. His grip on the knife handle went numb. His fingers opened. I grabbed his wrist, put my weight into it, and twisted. The sound of his wrist bone snapping was a dull, wet pop that echoed in the silent room. He collapsed, howling, clutching his ruined arm. The front doors of the quay burst open, not with a shout, but with a flood of blue. The BCI, Luther Grace, was in the lead. "Kellen Brack," Grace said, his voice booming. "You're under arrest." They flooded the room, a perfect silent team. "We have Dern in custody. He was trying to flee his apartment," Grace said into his radio. "Tell me you have eyes on Creston." "We do, sir," an agent's voice crackled back. "He's in his office, watching the live stream. He just put his hands on his head. We're moving in. Now." It was over. The BCI was securing Brack. Evan was checking on the other staff. I just stood there, my hands shaking. Cassian was leaning against the pillar, his face pale, his eyes still locked on me. The dark, wet stain was spreading down the front of his perfect white shirt. He looked at the broken, howling man on the floor, then at me. A small, pained smile touched his lips. Good form. I rushed to him, my hands, the ones he'd bandaged, pressing hard against the wound. "Don't talk. Evan, I need help." It's okay, Rhea," he whispered, his head slumping against the pillar. "No," I whispered back. my tears mixing with the blood on my hands. "No, it's not. It's my turn." I held him, pressing my hand to his shoulder, trying to hold his life in. "It's okay, rude man. My turn to take care of you." The North Pier syndicate didn't just break, it shattered. With Creston's arrest, broadcast live, the entire corrupt structure collapsed like a house of cards. Apex redevelopment was suspended, its assets frozen by the BCI. And my building, the burned-out husk of my home, Cassian, from his hospital bed, made one phone call. The Harbor Line Trust, the one that had saved my neighbor's belongings, bought the entire block out from under the BCI seizure. The property was transferred, not to him, but to a new community co-op. Every tenant, including me, was offered a path to buy our own homes. With zero interest loans, he wasn't just giving us a fish, he was giving us the whole, clean ocean. 2 weeks later, the sun was just rising over Port Verity. The mist was thick, clinging to the water. I stood on the pier, the one that looked out at the harbor, the one by his loft. He walked up behind me. His arm was in a black, elegant sling, but he was here. He didn't speak. I reached up and touched the anchor key, still hanging on its silver chain around my neck. "You offered me a plane, Cassian." "I did," he said, his voice quiet. I turned to face him. I took the heavy brass key off the chain. His face tightened, just for a second, thinking I was giving it back. Instead, I held it out on my palm. "I'm not leaving. I'm choosing to stay. Here, in my city. On my terms." I took his hand, the one that wasn't in the sling, and placed the key in it. "This isn't my harbor. It's ours. But I'll be keeping my own apartment." He looked at the key in his hand, then at me. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, reaching his eyes for the first time. "I'm not leaving Port Verity, Rhea," he said, his voice rough. "I'm just cleaning up my side of it." He leaned in, and his kiss was as sure and steady as the sunrise. It was slow and long and tasted like the salt of the sea and the promise of a new day. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, it was a beginning. The next week, I sat with Luther Grace and signed my final, official witness statement, closing the BCI's case. That night, I enrolled in night classes at Port Verity College, Community and Civic Investigation. Cassian began the long, slow, and brutal process of making the Ardeno Consortium 100% legitimate, even offering community shares to the new co-op at Harbor Street. The night I called him rude, he cleared a restaurant. The night we chose each other, we cleared a city, by hand, by kiss, by a promise with no chains. Thank you so much for listening to our story. Where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to chat and share our thoughts with you. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. If you enjoyed this, please consider supporting us further by hitting the hype button, so this story can be heard by even more people.